A very good evening, all of you. Good evening. Welcome to Supercoaching UPSC by Testbook. So, students, as you all know, that recently the BJP government or the NDA government has been formed for the third time. So, what will be the geopolitical considerations for this government for the next 5 years? What are the challenges we have with India rising? With India entering its rising phase, growing as one of the leading economy of the world, and also as part of the changing geopolitical dynamics of the world, there is a decent position of India rising. How we need to challenge this with respect to the changing geopolitical dynamics of the world? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What we need to do on this topic? There was a wonderful topic, a wonderful article which was recently written by C. Raja Mohan in Indian Express. So, keeping that into considerations, I am trying to discuss this topic, the geopolitical dynamics and the 5 major challenges for this present government. Now, how these challenges varying, what are the present context, and all is what are we discussing, right? That is the objective. So, if you see it, okay, what happened to this? So, if you see this, India's global challenges. There are 5 key international challenges as the government enters its third term. So, one of the major important thing we'll discuss is the changing power rivalry across the world. We are not even in the multilateralism is also under question mark. The countries are very changing their position, right? So the global powers, the power conflicts across the major powers. What are the impact? What is the possible impact on India? We'll be discussing. We'll be discussing about how the economy of a country has now shifted towards the geopolitics. So the global economic shifts are no longer with respect to globalization, but with respect to the geopolitics. Then we all know that in the present era, with the emergence of artificial intelligence and so many technologies which we are witnessing, the amount of technological revolutions which we are having is quite high. How are you engaging with new regions is what we need to study, and also managing our own rise. So how India manages its own rise. These are the 5 geopolitical things which we need to discuss. So let us start with the first one. The first one, what you call this, the navigating the great power rivalry. Navigating the great power rivalry. Now what is the powers? If you see, until 1990s, the major power of the world happens to be USA, right? USA and USSR. USA and USSR. After 91, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and all, USSR, Russia has lost its sheen. For a certain part, it was China, USA, which was the #1 power. And slowly, after 2000 and all, we have seen the rising China, the rising regional powers of the world and all. Now, with this, now what is happening? The global order is changing. The power rivalry has changed. When you have seen that China has risen, you also need to understand that when we have our foreign policy, when we had our foreign policy in 1930s, 1950s and 1990s, the second most power, which happens to be Russia at that point of time, as Russia is not having any close boundary, neither USA with India. So the new thing which we are talking about is what is the geographical reality. The second most power, most important power, China, happens to be India's neighbor. So that's it has its concern with respect to our security. So our foreign policy should keep into this consideration. So the changing power rivalry of the world is also very closely related with our geographical reality. Then number two, which we need to understand about the changing global power, how the dynamics are changing. What is the dynamics, all of you? Can you identify it? We all know that India, with respect to technological revolutions, technology, we are having close ties with USA. Even we are trying to have decent amount of trade. Even in terms of the people, right? The soft power, there is decent amount of India's diaspora in USA. For example, you can see in the recent USA World Cup, the World Cup, T20 World Cup, Cricket World Cup, we have seen USA. So many people are from Indian origin, right, who has even represented India at the lower levels of the cricket. So you can see the diaspora, which is significantly invested in our country. On one side is this, on one side, India defense relations with Russia. You all know that Russia, it is also a long-time friend. So for a long time, we had a very good friendly relationship and all. And nowadays, we are slowly shifting towards USA. And when you have seen that in USA and China are not getting into conflict, USA-China conflict, you have also seen that China is becoming very close to Russia as well. So what is happening? Our enemy, China, our kinds of concerns we have, not so friendly partner, is becoming a friend with our long-term reliable partner. So this is another changing dynamic. How do you think that it might have an impact on India? That is what we need to study about this. Then moving further, you have seen that these kind of things, the conflict between the West and the China-Russia has created a different external environment for India's foreign policy. Now, how do you handle this kind of thing? Is there any scope of multilateralism in the present era? Okay, multi-alignment. Is there any scope of that? Multi-alignment. See, in 1990, there is enough leveraging opportunity for India to utilize the changing dynamics back then. But right now, it is not the case. With with the Ukraine war, after the COVID-19 challenges, after the so many tensions which are happening across the world, the geopolitics have radically changed and they are not providing enough opportunity, and whatever India's leveraging position is there is shrinking with that. So the scope of multi-alignment, multilateral things is under question mark. This is the challenge we have. And based on this, how we need to handle it? So one of the idea is selective engagement. India must make calculated choices on issues based on its material interest, not ideological slogans like, multilateralism, non-alignment, all those kind of things are the era of the past now. That's what the opinion of the author says here. So keeping that into considerations, how can you have your material interest? What is your opinion on that? What do you mean by material interest? For example, how India handle its energy security, whatever it is in the need of the country in the present era, energy security. How India handles its skill power. For example, our demographic dividend. We need to utilize our demographic dividend for our growth. For that, we need to have decent amount of skills which we need to leverage with tie-ups with various countries. So these interests should be our norm rather than unplaced ideas like multilateralism and all those kind of things is what the author says. See, every theme which we are discussing in this topic in this page, navigating great power rivalry. What are the issues that there in the international relations? How our foreign policy should be aligned? What is the changing dynamics? You need to have a fair understanding of that. Right? Moving forward, the next major challenge we also had is adapting towards the global economic shifts. What do you mean by this one? Have you ever heard this geo-economic shift? Any one of you? Let me see the comments. Have you ever heard about geo-economic shifts? Right? Have you heard about this word? Geo-economic shifts. What do you mean by that? Anyone? Anyone? Come on quickly. Quickly. Okay. So what we are trying to tell you here is the present era is geo-economic positioning. So geopolitical concerns will have a say on the economy. Geopolitical concerns will have a say on the economy. You have seen the changing dynamics. You have seen the challenges with respect to different parts of the world, right? What is the example you can see? You can see recently, after the COVID-19, when you have seen that China has decent amount of supply chains, it is not the globalization which is the one which is controlling. It is we need to have alternative supply chains which are not dependent on China is what we are focusing upon. So what is the criteria? It is not economy, it is geopolitical concerns. So that shift towards economy, geopolitical positioning is a very, very important thing, right? So it is the geopolitical considerations which are calling for new ideas, which are questioning the existing liberalism, questioning the existing globalization. Also, we have seen that there is decent enough of rising protectionism across the world. You have seen the conflict between India and USA and China, the trade wars, right? You have seen the conflict with respect to even in Europe and all. So all these kind of things are challenging what? The trade wars. They are questioning the viability of globalization which we have seen for the last 20 years, right? This is what we are seeing. We are also seeing that how India can reform our economy. What is the India's capacity for right now, especially with respect to of a coalition government. So they had its own challenges. So on one side, the global economy is changing. It is having a close linkages with the geopolitics of the world. And at the same time, what is our viability towards handling that? What is the scope which the present government has, especially with respect to a coalition? There are fair concerns with respect to that. So, right, these are what the challenges are there. Then you can talk about, so for this, you see the solution. India must seize new opportunities to enhance its position in the evolving global economic order. What can you do? You can raise our manufacturing. You can talk about our agriculture potential. You can talk about our services. Every sector, we need to focus on that. And accordingly, in certain things, we need to master it. Say cotton, we can master that. Say the global supply chain concerns with respect to critical minerals. How can we do that? We need to have a policy. So, okay, critical minerals. Say nowadays, as the economy of the world is shifting towards the minerals, how we need to handle your critical minerals, how India needs to handle the renewable energy. Renewable energy. All those kind of things are what we need to focus upon. Then moving forward, yes. The third option, they say this, the changing technologies across the world. How India needs to handle the emerging technologies and how emerging technologies are the one which control the economy and the geodynamics, geopolitical considerations of a region. For example, When you talk about technology, as I told you, India, USA has so much amount of trade and technology pacts. How you can leverage these technological pacts for what you can say, harnessing the demographic dividend of India. You all have known it by now. India has a very, very good working force population. Our working force population should be harnessed, and this will be there only for the next 15 years. We need to look about these kind of concerns, how we can handle it. That is a challenge. And for this, critical emergent technologies, that's the initiative with respect to US, is a step towards accelerating India's technological development. So these are the ones which you have, right? Then especially with China, you have the state monopolies in China. How does we handle the state monopoly? Because yes, already we have seen, we are having our own concerns for calling for, any kind of Chinese presence in our telecommunication sector, which is very crucial for our communication networks. We have seen the challenges with respect to that we need to handle. This is one of the aspect. Then the fourth aspect which they say is, because of the changing geodynamics, as you can see in this picture, there is emergence of new regions. You already have seen the Indo-Pacific shift, the call for, you can see that organization where the Quad, right? India, Australia, Japan, USA, Quad versus respect to USA, with respect to versus China, with India, USA, Australia and Japan. So you can see how the Indo-Pacific shift, emergence of the Indo-Pacific as a new strategic region, requires India to rethink its regional engagement. You can already have seen that this is increasing. In the past, we have spoken about things like look east policy. Enough of looking the west, look for the east. Look for the Asian tie-ups and all those kind of things. So, and that has increased like anything. So that scope, the opportunities of that has radically changed. This is what I am trying to talk you here. Moving forward, as you can see, the westward expansion. India must invest more resources in engaging with Africa, Southern Europe and the Middle East. So nowadays, Africa, recently if you have seen, last 2 years, there is a question about Africa, because there is talking about how we can utilize the opportunities in Africa for our growth. That is there. We are talking about the Middle East, say the Middle East-Europe corridor, Central Asian republics, the challenges with respect to Indian North-South transport corridor, International North-South transport corridor, all those kind of things. We are talking about such kind of things in these areas, Middle East, Southern Europe and all. These are all against the Belt and Road Initiative of China, right? So we have seen that similarly, India needs to erase its own mental maps and view these regions as interconnected opportunities. So we need to erase some of the old boundaries, some of the old challenges, and reinvent and recreate new things with the changing dynamics is what the author is calling for. This is very, very important. Considerations of new things, new emergences. For example, recently with respect to Russia, there we are already talking about one of the idea of, getting more oil from Murmansk of Russia, right? Murmansk of Russia. We are talking about getting more oil from this. This we are trying to get via the Bering Strait. So the opening, the ice melting in the Arctic region is providing this opportunity. So we are doing a fairly well part on this part. Similarly, other things and all, we need to look into the considerations. So look at the themes. What I'm trying to ask you, homework for you is, India's foreign policy with respect to emergence of new regions, emergence of new regions, emergence of latest technologies, with respect to changing power rivalries, with respect to changing economic dynamics of the world. I want you to focus on each thing in a good way so that you are learning about each theme in much more detailed. This is very, very important, my dear friends. Moving forward, the next thing which I would like to tell you about the fifth one, how India itself handles its own rise. For example, the author calls for, yes, with the changing dynamics, with India almost emerging as a third, third largest economy in the near future, with almost around $4 trillion economy and all. Yet, we also need to considerations about what is our total aggregate GDP versus per capita, which is very, very less, indicating that there is a decent focus which we need to do on still on development. We need to harness our economic dividend. For that, we need to upskill ourselves. For that, we need to look after our education, our healthcare, our infrastructure in our country, so that ultimately the per capita of our country increases like anything. The contrasting amount of money with respect to the increasing inequalities are raising a cause of concern whether we have enough inclusive growth in our country. In fact, one of the political author talks about the recent elections that one of the reason why in certain areas the incumbent government has been lost, the reason was simple. There is growth in some of the places, say like UP. If you have seen Uttar Pradesh, BJP could not do well in Uttar Pradesh. One of the political authors says that, yes, there is decent enough growth happened in UP, but it is not able to percolate across different communities and different sections of our society. So what we are calling of it is, the growth is happening, but the growth is yet not inclusive. Because why it is not inclusive? Because we have lack of, what you can say is, there is more economic inequalities where rich becoming richer, poor becoming poorer. So that is why the focus on inclusive growth is once again coming up after the elections right now. So that is the thing. So that's what they are focusing on. What do you say? Inclusive growth. That's where the author talks about equity. Equity, that is whether different sections of our society are able to harness that benefits or not. That is there. Then, not more than that, on one side, we have to agree with that India's economy is rising. With the changing geopolitical dynamics of excessive dependence on China, the world is looking for emergence of countries like India. Definitely on one side, we must use this. So on one side, we are growing, that is our strength, but we should also make it sure that we are not overestimating our strength. Yes, sometimes, according to the author, sometimes we are actually overestimating our strength. So what the author calls for more economic reforms, more things to be done at the economic level, so that automatically India's rise with respect to exports, with respect to GDP, with respect to world's dependence on India would rise, and automatically you will see that our strength is using leveraged. For example, I still remember one of the beautiful words said by Manmohan Singh, the then government. He said that when you could not get the reforms of United Nations Security Council, when there is a call for reforms of United Nations Security Council, he said only one thing. My whole objective will be let my country grow at the rate of at least around 9 to 10% of GDP growth every year for the next 10-15 years, and I would see which country or which nation or how the world can stop India to leverage its position in the world. So the idea is very simple. We need to grow with our economy like anything. We need to have our patents on technology. We need to increase our research and development for the technological aspects. We need to increase our skill power, qualitative skill power, so that these are all the strengths of India which we can leverage for our own benefits later on. That's what the author says, right? And the other is also saying that because of the existing challenges, sir, we should not underestimate our challenge, be it with respect to the things like the Chinese thing, the linkages with respect to Chinese Pakistan, the internal security concerns arising. We should not underestimate is what the author calling for. Right. With these things, what the author says is, now with these challenges, definitely, see, one of the thing which you need to remember as part of the UPSC preparation is, you cannot, yes, you cannot always dependent on things like, criticizing certain things. You have to bring solutions. You have to bring new ideas. You have to bring new opportunities. So whenever you read a certain thing, yes, on one side, you have to understand about the challenges. On the other side, you also need to focus upon the existing solutions. For example, you see, for it, the author calls for India must base its foreign policy choices on a cold calculation of material interests, not ideological slogans like multilateralism, right? Non-alignment. These will not work. The author calls for more foreign policy choices of material interest like technological interest, strategic autonomy. So one of the key words which you need to understand, strategic autonomy, which India actually focuses on. Strategic economy, right? That's what we need to focus on. Then the next thing, navigating constraints. India's geographical proximity to China and the intensifying great power rivalry, it limits its room for maneuver, right? So intensifying great funding, how we can handle this is what one of the question is. The next thing is how the rapid domestic prosperity and equity, if you do it domestically, how India is growing, the GDP growth rate, the India's aspirations of developed country, India's Amrit Kal 2047 plan, all those kind of things, we need to look into the ideas. Once you look into this, with this, where we need to talk about, we need to engage with the word with the respect of self-assurance, strategic autonomy, right? And we need to transfer our domestic prosperity and reduce inequality, through which we can harness through these benefits of increasing economic power, more economic household, more economic prosperity. Through those things, the foreign policy can be shaped so that ultimately we can utilize these opportunities for our growth. So I would definitely say that read about different aspect of whatever I have told you in this session. Every aspect, I want you to have one particular page where you are discussing about this in detail. You are identifying these themes and focusing on that. Any of these 5 themes which I had discussed in today's session can be a possible mains answer question for you in your international relations. That is about this theme. I hope you have liked this. Let me know, based on this, let me know. Answer this question and try to answer this in the comment section about explain how Indian foreign policy should be formulated with the changing dynamics of the world, with the changing geopolitical dynamics of the world. So with respect to the changing geopolitical dynamics, how Indian policy, foreign policy should be formulated for the next 5, 10, 15 years is what is the question, right? Let me know about your opinion on this, right? If you want the PDF file, you can get this PDF file from a Telegram channel. And more than that, any doubts you have about any of these topics and all, please don't hesitate to ask me. Right then, all of you, will come with another interesting topic tomorrow. Until then, have a good time. Thank you. Jai Hind.